Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Sexpertease. We're diving into an incredibly powerful and inspiring journey of resilience, survival, and empowerment. Today, I'm joined by a photographer and entrepreneur who has faced immense challenges in her past, but has turned her struggles into strength and success. Please welcome Lisa Hodgekiss, a true example of overcoming adversity and embracing personal growth. We're so grateful to have her here today to share her story.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Lisa, it's good to have you again. This is your second time here, so I'm very excited to chat. And I'm really grateful that you actually were the one to contact me to let me know that you wanted to share this story and felt that it was important for people to be aware. So let's touch base first with the fact that you had mentioned that when you were very young, you unknowingly became involved in the world of sex work. Can you kind of like walk us through that time and what you wish you had known back then in terms of like education, safety, etc.?
Yeah, so the very first time I got involved with it unknowingly was basically a teen paid website where you were showing, you were in swimwear. And for the girls that were over the age of 18 to 19, they would do topless. But for the anyone who was a minor, you would do bikini. And we would do photo shoots, we had video shoots, and we would get paid a monthly commission. And at the time, it was touted as this is normal, this is acceptable, this is never once was it brought up that this was considered sex work. The people that I worked with were professional. They never tried to do anything,
Inappropriate. Yeah.
appropriate or vulgar. I never, and it was men and women, and I never felt uncomfortable on set, but I never realized until I got older that this is sex work. This is minors. This is being published on a website for a very specific audience, and what they're doing with those images, we have no control over what they're doing with those images. And they are posing these children, I can't say women, children, as in very seductive poses. And it was normalized in the early 2000s and 90s. And it was not, there was not enough awareness out there to really say, hey, this is inappropriate. This is not something
Right.
any
So were
child
there like
doing.
model releases at all? Because being someone that's modeled myself, was anything signed, or how was it presented that you started doing the work not knowing that it was like not
There
okay?
there were contracts where we were signing model releases, but it was never, at least from what I could remember, anything that said what the content was specifically being used for. It was just that you were releasing your rights to the photos to be used in whatever medium that they or format that they saw fit. And parents had to sign it, and that's the thing. They were really good about talking to the parents about, I guess, downplaying the nature of the content.
Right.
And to this day, I can't say I've seen any of the photos. I've never gone onto the website and tried to look for my photos. I knew of the websites, and I've gone to them just to check them out before I worked with them, but I never
Yeah.
went there, signed up, and tried to find my photos, and neither did my mom. And we never got the finished images that were like published on the websites. We received compensation for our time and commissions,
But
but
then that was it. Then it was like whatever. It's so crazy. That kind of reminds me, the name is escaping me. But that movie where there is sex trafficking involved, but that's kind of how they lured in the parents, is that it was like a modeling gig for their children, but then the kids actually ended up disappearing during the shoot. But what is the name of that movie? It's it's like recent-ish, but Anyways, so that's some scary stuff. Um, Looking back on that experience, what do you feel was like the biggest gaps in resources and accountability, really, um, when it comes to those that are involved in sex work, especially young people? Did that gap influence your own journey in terms of like healing and later becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, as far as the accountability and the resources at the time, like I said, it was normalized. You
Right.
had in the high fashion industry, in the modeling industry, commercials, even acting, children doing 13, 12, 11-year-old looking like they were 20, 22 for runway, for editorials.
Yeah.
Um, Even being in Vogue, some children were topless or implied sheer clothing, and it was all for the sake of art. But now we're realizing it does not matter what the intention is
Yeah.
behind the art. If it's a child, it's a child. They should not be exploited and put in those type of situations. And back then, we were told, hey, this is just a fun bikini shoot. You're hanging out on the beach with a bunch of other girls. We're going to video and take some photos of this, and you're going to make some great money. Um, it
Hmm.
was and it went all the way down the line. It was the photographers, the directors, the makeup artists, the hairstylists, the wardrobe stylists, the females on the set. They were all in on it, and it's upsetting because it's you would think that women would watch out for children in that sense because they have to be aware of what's going on. They know what the photos are being used for.
Right.
At what point did anybody stop to say, hey, this doesn't seem right?
Like
Um,
nobody questioned it.
why is a 16-year-old flaunting her butt in on the beach in a thong and a teeny bikini? So things have changed since then. It's definitely not something you're going to see as much, but back then it was normalized, and I'm glad that we've kind of moved away from that. And but there's still, to my knowledge, there aren't any actual laws or regulations in place to actually stop it and hold people accountable. People get slapped on the wrist
Well,
and some jail time for 6 months.
especially because if the parents are giving consent, then it's like it's hard to regulate that. I mean, I was pretty misled as someone who's modeled before. I mean, I didn't start modeling till after the age of 18, so I was already an adult. But even I was a little bit, I guess, brainwashed to think that I started modeling late because it was normalized. I thought that, most successful models started at 13, 14 years old and they were like retired by the time they're in their like 20s, you know. But having this conversation with you, I realized how that made maybe that shouldn't have been normalized because me being ignorant, I didn't know what types of shoots they were doing. I just assumed like you said, like high fashion and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I wish I had started sooner. I started too late. But really, when you talk about some of the poses that these girls are in and some of the trends that they represented at that age, yeah, maybe that wasn't okay. And it is kind of weird that no one, at least at the time, because even I didn't realize at the time, no one really stood up to say, hey, why aren't we questioning this? I mean, it could be for the paycheck, it could be for the promise of getting famous one day or representing a well known brand. Um, but yeah, that's crazy that like you actually did experience that because you were that age, when you were put in those positions. So, being in the modeling industry before getting in sex work, can you explain how the modeling industry may have unintentionally brought you down that path? Now that we're kind of on that topic of like modeling and that fine line between being a model and then like sex work and how you may have gotten to that point.
Well, you think because you're in the industry, you think you know everything, and you think you've seen everything, and you think you know what little tricks everybody has up their sleeve, so you're aware. But and keeping in mind that you know sexualized children was normalized back then. You had Britney Spears on the cover of Rolling Stone at what, 16, 17, with
That's true.
nothing on her bikini. And that was normal. So when you're already conditioned by society to think that this is acceptable, when you're getting the casting coming across your table that says, oh, it's just a swimwear shoot on the beach with other girls, you think, oh, this is nothing, I'll have fun. And you go and do it. You're not realizing that the images are being sold for other intentions. And they want to get you at that younger age. They went as young as 13 and up to 19 so that they can, if you continued working with them, were prepped and primed and ready to go at 18 to drop everything off
Yeah,
and
that's
move
true.
into that more explicit area. And for me, I was with them for a couple of shoots, and that ended up leading to footwork that I had no idea was actually considered sex work until I was in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah, you
Uh,
probably thought I'm just modeling my feet. It's fine.
yes,
Yeah.
and it was presented that way. And not once was it the word kink or sexual gratification ever mentioned by anybody who I worked with. But the commission checks were great, so I was like, I'm gonna keep doing this. I
Yeah.
wasn't being mistreated on set. I wasn't being, I didn't feel uncomfortable with anybody. So I was like, this is great. And now as I'm older, I'm like, this is sex work. It's a form of sex work. And
Mhm.
even though I'm not interacting directly with the fans, they're on a website for, a pay-per-view website. And you have no say in how they use that content.
What, in your opinion, what more do you think could be done in industries like this to protect vulnerable individuals from being manipulated or taken advantage of? Because, like you said, this is pretty much like a grooming process.
It is. And as much as I hate to say government oversight, some type of oversight, if not a third party oversight committee that can have the authority to step on set for any of these shoots at any given time. These photographers, I would love to be able to see photographers. Production companies have to register their employees. How many sexual predators do we have posing as photographers out there or videographers
Right.
and putting people in vulnerable positions? Um, and I just feel like there could be something in place to keep a thumb on those people, and education and awareness, educating the parents and making them more aware of the dangers of grooming and what it actually is and the signs. Because for me, it didn't seem scary or bad at all when I got those castings.
Which that in itself is scary that it's that disguised that it was totally normal. I mean, because you also think of I always thought of like hand modeling. Like, okay, so feet, all right, same thing, you would think, but being that age and not really knowing what type of pay-per-view site you're on, you're getting paid. The parents probably don't question it. I'm thinking too, parents need to ask more questions.
Yeah. What are these? I mean, you're
Yeah,
doing foot modeling, or are you doing this for Nordstrom Rack? Like foot
right.
modeling for shoe company or foot modeling
Yeah.
for a sex website. Like there are different types of foot models. You can be a hand model for a jewelry line, or you can be a different type of hand model.
Yeah. What
And
else, like,
weren't
what else
asked.
do you think society needs to focus on in terms of educating young people about the dangers and realities of sex work? And how can we equip them with the right tools? Because I was going to say one thing, like, definitely for the parents that are listening, asking questions, getting things on paper. But how can we educate young people in order to advocate for themselves?
Being the children being aware, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but us having as adults those conversations with kids to let them know what the signs and what those signs are when they're presented to them online or in person. Because online too, you can be sucked into it just by saying, hey, send me a picture of your feet real quick. And then they get free content that they can then turn around and sell on a foot website. And now your kids content feet are on some foot website that your parent did not give any consent to, and that child gave no consent to. So um, I think really having those conversations with the kids about this is reality. This is the world we live in. We're a tech focused society now, and you have to be able to protect yourself when you're online and who you are communicating with and who you are letting in your orbit, because it's very easy for people to try and what you yourself are posting online. How many young girls, 13, 14-year old, are doing little selfies with, their
Mm.
breasts up and
And
posting it online?
with the rise of like Instagram Reels and TikTok and the trends, and I can only imagine the amount of people, I'll say people, who observe these videos and probably reach out to some of these younger people online. And I hate to tie in the economy with this conversation, but I also feel too the more that our society struggles when it comes to finances, because I feel like we don't have, and this is my personal opinion, people may disagree while watching the show. I don't feel like we have much of a middle class anymore. Like you're either rich or you're like poor. And so it's more enticing, even as a young person, to do whatever for money, especially if the parent isn't asking questions or isn't really looking at what their child is getting into when it comes to online conversations and things like that. So the idea of making tons of money modeling your feet is very enticing, whether they know it's sex work or not. So, yeah, I do think it's important that parents have that conversation and let them know what the reality is. People are desperate, and we have our, people that are not wealthy willing to do things, and then we have our rich people who are willing to pay for that and don't really care if you're underage or not. So, and it sucks to say that that is the reality. So, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
I think
but yeah.
the best plan forward is to have that awareness. Like,
Yeah.
don't bury your head in the sand and say everything's, rainbows and butterflies and my child, it will never happen to my child, because it's the reality is it happens to just about every child in some way, shape, or form. They have probably been faced with some type of sexual assault, harassment, um, bullying, and you've got to have those tough conversations with your kids and let them be aware.
Yeah.
The stranger danger when we were kids, don't go up to someone offering you candy because you get thrown into a van, is no different than don't communicate with people you don't know online. And even then, very weary of what you send and post.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you spoke about your journey about accepting what happened, and then later having that be empowering for you later in life. What helped you process like what you went through and move forward from that period of your life into your experience as an entrepreneurial mindset? And, what advice would you give someone who's gone through a difficult experience and is now looking to reinvent themselves?
Well, first things that for me it was not to forgive myself, first of all, just to go back to that child and tell her, I'm sorry, I did not know any better, and to not hold myself responsible for what happened to me, because at the end of the day, I was a child and I was preyed upon by people who took advantage of a child that didn't know any better, and a parent that wasn't there as much as she should have been or could have been, to stop that. And you, as a victim, you can use that power to strengthen your own voice and your own confidence by, when you're ready, sharing that story. There are so many people online who are trying to change from a societal deepness, to the stigma, the horrible realities of misogyny and human trafficking. And if you are willing to share the story, share your story. That helped me, accepting that what it was for what it was, not being angry with myself or gaslighting myself or saying you should have known better. That didn't do anything to help me.
Right.
Accepting it for what it was and then willing to share it with other people. I've just me sharing it with others in the recent year, they too have had their own realizations for their own
Mhm.
personal situations, and it's helped them on their journey. So you never know who it could help just by talking about it and then getting the resources if it does affect you. Because I feel I don't want to minimize what I went through, but I feel like my experience was not nearly as bad as what other people have been forced to go through.
Mhm.
Um, and if it is, if you are having that realization or you find yourself in that situation, find those resources. Get online if you can to find those resources and reach out. Pick up the phone. Sometimes just reading it isn't enough. You might need to actually connect with a human and get some therapy, and work through those emotions. For me, it was writing and sharing that story and putting it into photo shoots that would allow me to be creative and use females as the subject so that they too could display their resilience because they all had their own stories that they'd been through, and being able to give them that platform really excited me. Um, I didn't realize that was part of my journey until 3 or 4 years after I started shooting professionally. But it was when I had that light bulb moment of, hey, I went through this and this is what it really is. It helped kind of ignite that fire a little bit more, um, kind of align that mission in my life.
Right, right. No, I appreciate you sharing this. It reminds me a little bit of something that I also went through. It's not as blatant as, like, for example, most of the public knows that I was raped when I was a teen, and that was like blatant sexual abuse. You know what it is. Whereas, like you said, talking about your story is really important because a friend of mine had opened up to me about a story of something that she went through where the abuse wasn't blatant. It was kind of like your situation where it's like, you were doing this thing, didn't seem like it was causing anyone any harm, but at the end of the day it was considered sex work. And she went through something
Under the law.
similar. Yeah, yeah.
Under the
And so
law. I was
yeah,
like, oh my goodness, how did I not get in trouble with the police? That was another
right.
thing. That was like the light bulb moment, but go on.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. But it took her telling me her story for me to realize that I had gone through something just like it. But I also I was not aware that it was at the time considered any type of manipulation or abuse. Um, and it was quite frankly a gentleman that used to be a friend of mine. We're no longer friends, but it was kind of the scenario that I described earlier. He had offered me money in exchange for taking photos of me with less clothes on, but he disguised it as a friend trying to help a friend. And I never agreed to it because I was like, no, that's fine. But for some reason, it didn't really alarm me until a different friend went through the same thing with the same guy. And I was like, wait, I was like, this story sounds familiar. And I realized like this isn't okay. Like we're being exploited because we need the money and he has the money. But because we had known this individual for so long, it was disguised as like, oh, I'm just a friend giving you an opportunity so that I can help you out.
Yeah.
And so your story hits home when it comes to that for me, like relating to it. Because it's important that if you're listening, if you're someone who's listening right now and you've been through something like this, it's important to talk about it because in case a young person doesn't have a parent who is having those conversations with them or isn't asking those tough questions, we want at least young people to be aware, even if it's through outlets like us, saying, hey, this happened to me. And then they might have a light bulb and be like, oh, I went through that. Maybe what I'm going through right now isn't okay or appropriate. Um, so yeah, that was a difficult time for me, to be honest, because that was almost more difficult for me to swallow than the blatant abuse that I had already gone through.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Your rape story. I was 18 when I was actually raped, and I didn't realize it was actually rape
Hmm.
until I was 32. It was a friend. I went over to their house, and this is where it sucks at the same time to be a girl, because you're taught as a girl to, if you're trying to get out of a bad situation, do as little as you can to make it bad. Like, walk on those eggshells, be as
Mm.
safe as you can so you can get out of the situation as safely as you can without the explosion, so to speak. So I was hanging out at this person's house that I thought was a friend. We knew in high school. First time hanging out at their house. And they went full on, like, got me into their bedroom. And I was laughing it off, saying, I'm not interested. This isn't what I want to do. And that fear kicked in of, oh, he's not playing around. I need to go into survival mode and
Yeah.
associate and just go with the flow so I can get the fuck out of here as
Mm.
safely as I can. And so, when they say lay there like a fish, like a dead fish, I laid there like a dead fish.
Oh,
And because I was just so disassociated with it, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. And this was someone I thought was a friend. And the entire time, afterwards, I was like, okay, I did it. I never have to talk to him again. I got out of that house as quickly as I could, and I never spoke to him ever again. And I wrote it in the back of my mind as it was just sex with someone that I didn't really want to have sex with, not realizing that was rape. I said no like 15 fucking times. And
right.
I was frozen in fear that I disassociated, and I was in so much denial for so many years that I was like, oh, this was just, a one off with a friend that was ended up being a crappy person, not realizing that was really rape. And
Right.
when that realization hit me, it took me a couple of months to finally like wrap my head around, like, okay, you were taken advantage of, that was rape, and what can I do to ensure that that doesn't ever happen to my daughter or anyone
Yeah.
else? Because you were friends with the person and you thought this person is safe, you can go into their house.
Hmm. And that's the crappier part too, is like, yes, they preach stranger danger, but man, I hear more stories about trust being broken amongst friends or family members or someone that you trust. But even like with the modeling scenario, with the feet and the bikini and all that, these are people that inherently you and your mother or you and your parents trusted at the time. So it's crazy that it tends to more often than not be someone that is trusted or brought into the circle. So you have to almost worry more about the people you have closest to you than the total stranger. And that's another reason why it's so important to tell your story and to be aware, and for young people to be aware of their surroundings, um, regardless of, well, it's just a cousin, it's just a friend. No, you still have to be careful. And I totally get that about the feeling like it wasn't rape until like it really came to you and you had to like wrap your head around it. Even my rape scenario, even though it was blatantly rape, like you said, we're conditioned to act a certain way as women. And for a while there, you know, I had a parent that blamed me by saying, well, if you didn't hang out with guys all the time, or if you hadn't XYZ. So when I was young and ignorant, I thought it was my fault. For a long time there, I thought I had done something to cause what happened. Um, and that's so unfair. Ugh.
That's where I'm trying to change. That's where I'm trying to change the conversation in society, because, like you said, your own parent was saying, well, had you not, wait, motherfucker, what about him?
Right.
Why? why aren't we asking him, why didn't you do this? Why did you not give into your temptation? Why
Yeah.
aren't we flipping the
We're,
switch? Why is
we're
it the
always
female's
questioning the woman.
responsibility? Why is it her fault
Yeah.
that this happened to her? Why is it not, this man did a really crappy thing and he should be held accountable for it, regardless of how she looked, regardless of what she said, regardless of how she moved? It should not matter.
Right.
She should
Right.
not have to fear how she exists in any type of environment for fear of retaliation from another person.
Yeah. And I feel similarly when the tables are turned because we have heard about women abusing younger boys. Like you've heard
Yep.
about the teachers and the students, and that's usually the most common, at least that I've heard of. And I feel like the process of holding that person accountable is a little different because they're a female rather than a male who did the crime. And I don't understand that. No, like it doesn't matter if you're a guy or a woman, you need to be held accountable in the same way. It's still abuse. Even
Yep.
if that young boy doesn't realize that it's abuse and thinks like, woohoo, like I had sex with an older woman. No, like they're still preying on you. And I
Yes.
feel like young men need to also be aware and educated about the signs of like someone abusing them as well.
Because even if you think about it from like a scientific standpoint, a grown woman who's in her 30s, 20s, 40s is going to be at a maturity level that is not that of a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old child.
Thank you.
He might see forever and ever amen. He also might see, oh, this is something quick I can do for an experience. At no point in time is that woman looking forward to spending the rest of her life with that person. So you are using that child for your sexual gratification for now. And God knows what type of trauma you're leaving that person with when
Right.
you've heard your fun and you decide to move on. Or worst case, you get pregnant and this child is now responsible
For
for
a
the
child.
child that you probably had no desire to be with
Mm-mm.
long term.
Mm-hmm.
It's selfish.
Yeah.
It's predatory and selfish and disgusting. You as an adult should be able to say, I understand that you have a crush on me, but that is as far as it's going. We are not crossing that line. If we need
Right.
to cut off communication, switch classes, whatever, we will make that happen. You need to be an adult and recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish we heard more stories about that, about people just setting boundaries. Like, it's not that hard to set a boundary. Just set a boundary. Like, so I don't know. I feel like this conversation definitely needed to be had. Um, I think that, like I said, if you're a parent watching this, make sure you're talking to your kids because more than likely there won't be any teenagers necessarily watching this show, but for the adults that are watching this show, talk to your kids. Let them know what the realities are, how to protect themselves, how to make sure that they also don't grow up to be the predator as well. Because we always talk about like protect yourself, don't be the victim. But like we don't want our kids also to grow up to be the predator. So it's important to be more aware. And so I just want to thank you for sharing your story. That time went by really fast. I
Yeah.
feel like this could have been an hour or more long
Yeah, you
conversation.
might have
So
to cut it
yeah.
out.
But definitely thank you for being here. And for those of you that are listening, I'm gonna pull up Lisa's website so that you guys can stay in touch, and that's southerncharmcreative.com. And would you like to also mention what socials you're on, Lisa?
Instagram at Southern Charm Creative, and I'm on YouTube at Southern Charm Creative as well.
Any plugs for the photography business?
No,
No.
just you're more than welcome to visit the website. And thank you for having the space for me to share my story.
Absolutely. You are welcomed anytime. And also, please, for those of you listening, join me on patreon.com/the Erica Rivera, where we dive deeper into these episodes and into these conversations. We have a newsletter that goes out as well. And you can find me on all socials at the Erica Rivera. So thank you again, and we will see you in March. That was our last episode for February. Holy cow. February went a lot faster than January did.
Tell me about
Right?
it.
January felt like it was never ending.
Yeah.
So anyways, stay curious, stay safe, and we will see you next time.